and been on a couple, 3 or 4 already this morning. So I would expect him.
He might just be taking a quick break.
Maybe.
Okay. So, oh, we have Jess. We have a quorum. Yeah. Okay. We have a quorum, and it's exactly 1:30, so we'll call this meeting to order. Karen, may I get a roll call?
Chair McNulty.
Here.
Vice Chair Reisner. Member Dunno.
Here.
Member Foley.
Here.
Member McNeely.
Here.
Member Bondoc.
Here.
Member Mood.
He said he would be late. Paul just emailed me.
Member Bauman.
I'm here.
And Member Truly. Executive Director Morley.
Here.
Planning Manager Wessel.
Not yet.
Transportation Planner Gonzalez.
Here.
Transportation Planner Tavel.
Here.
Montoya Fellow Holiday.
Here.
And I am Administrative Assistant Karen Moeller, and I'm here.
Okay. We have, I don't see anybody here for public comment. So we will move to the approval of the minutes of August 23rd, 2023. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Of course. All right. Any, I guess do we have to go before we can even talk about it?
You could talk about it now or make a motion and then call for any further discussion.
Okay. Any discussion, questions, comments, revisions? Can I get a motion to approve the TAC meeting minutes of August 23rd, 2023?
I'll move to approve. This is Member Dunham.
Thank you. And would anyone like to second?
I'd like to second. This is Jeff.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, approved unanimously. We have nothing on the consent agenda, so we'll move on to general business. We have an update on the consider the approval of the West 66 operational assessment guidance documents from Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm actually going to talk to you about 3 items today. The first one is, yes, the Project Advisory Committee. Then we'll move into the escalation process, and then just a very quick moment to discuss the public involvement plan. And as mentioned, we are seeking your approval of both the PAG document and the escalation process. Next slide, please. So starting with the PAG, this document outlines the expectations and guidance for our PAG members. And listed here are the proposed members. Those who are highlighted, we are awaiting confirmation. We did extend an additional invite to Martin Ince and Jenny Neiman as they are specialists within their departments, and their knowledge will certainly come in handy in this planning process. However, if they are unable to formally join the PAG, we do plan on keeping them in the loop and inviting them to those meetings where their topics will be explicitly discussed. And of course, just keep them in the loop as well. And let's see, I think the only person I was waiting to hear from, and I hate to put you on the spot, Myrna, if you were the correct assignment for our PAG group, or if there was somebody else you'd like to assign to this.
No, that's okay. I'll take it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Next slide, please. The document did receive one comment so far, and that comment was related to the ground rules on consensus, and it's item number 1, equal, everyone is equal. There was a concern because of ADOT's ownership of the roadway that the process would not be equal. So for clarity, the following sentence as shown there on the slides was added to page 7 of the document to specify that this is our collective respect and equal treatment of each other just as participants. So just defining that a little bit more. Next slide, please. And I'll take any additional comments and questions towards the end here. So moving on to the escalation process. This is another guiding document that guides us towards consensus should any issues arise during our planning process. And demonstrated here is a list of those participants for each level. And Brendan did it for me. ADOT is still working on a representative for level 3. So we'll plug that person in as soon as they are confirmed. And I did not receive any additional comments or feedback on this document. Next slide. So I'll open it up for discussion, see if there were any additional staff assignments and any general feedback, questions, concerns, and if everybody was okay with that new addition to the grounds of consensus within the PAC document.
Just one thing I would say, if you don't mind going back to that one slide for a second, the next one, please. Oh,
Escalation process, there we go.
escalation process, there we go. The one thing I noticed, looking at it earlier today, the 2-week, does it say maximum
Correct.
earlier? I don't think that's feasible
Sure.
at the level, so.
Okay.
It probably needs to be as soon as possible. We typically, for our escalation, use as soon as possible as needed kind of thing.
Okay.
If you want to put a time limit to it, I would say 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Just trying to schedule people at that level is
Sure.
more difficult.
Of course. No, thank you for that feedback. I can happily change that if everybody is on board with that. All right, yes. So we'll go back to the discussion slide, please. Here. There we go. So before we jump into the public involvement plan, I just wanted to go ahead and get that motion out there with, of course, this new change to the escalation timeline for level 3.
No, I didn't, sorry. Oh, sorry. I was reading the slide. Can we get a recommendation for the TAC? For the TAC to approve the West 66 Operational Assessment Project Advisory Group and escalation process as presented with the changes as suggested by Brandon. Does someone want to make that motion to approve?
I can make that motion to approve it as stated.
Okay, thank you. Not stated well, but stated. All right, can we get a second? Yes, Jeff, are you trying to talk?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I would
we thought
like-
you were trying to second. Jeff.
I am. I would like to second.
Oh, Jess, you were, I'm sorry, Jess.
Oh.
For
Jeff
the
beat me
record-
to it.
Okay, on that one, Jeff will be the second here. Sorry, Jess. I'm gonna get my game together with this next one. And I do see that we have Dave Wessel. Okay, hello. So we're gonna, oh, there's still a couple more slides.
One or two. Well, thank you all for that motion. Very much appreciate it. And of course, your feedback getting us to this point. Included in your packet is a draft of the public involvement plan. This obviously outlines our activities for each task of the project. However, as I did state, it is very much in draft form because we want to take this to the PAG to refine it even further. So please feel free to take a look at it and provide any comments in the next few weeks would be much appreciated. And that's it on the public involvement plan.
So,
Thank you. Oh, yes.
just going back,
Sure.
we realized that we didn't take a formal
Oh,
vote
no,
on the
please,
motion.
sorry, go ahead.
So if we can, we're gonna go back to the motion where we had a motion and a second to recommend approval of the operational assessment and escalation process as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Can
I'd
I
also
make
like to-
one- Oops, sorry. Can I make one quick change? I'm sorry, I was just thinking about it. And I think that X for ADOT, I think that should be me as well. So I don't want to make everybody re-vote again. So since we're re-voting, you can go ahead and insert me in that position.
I'm sorry. I'm
So,
sorry.
Myrna was,
Yeah,
first
sorry,
I'd like
the
to know
level-
how Mood has
Yeah,
joined.
the level 3, the X for ADOT, put me in for that. And then I'm, you know, if
Brenna,
if
why don't
we
we
need to
talk,
revote for it.
Brenna, this is Brendan, why don't we chat afterwards? Because I'm not sure
Okay.
that that's the level for that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You want to leave it there? As the X.
I think if Myrna's okay with it, leave it as it is for the time being,
Okay.
and then we'll talk and get back on a person for that level.
Myrna, would you have interest in being part of level 1?
Is well, I
We have,
when you say
go ahead.
when you're stating the levels, which one has the most I don't want to say authority, because I really don't feel like I should be that. So that's why I was thinking level 3 would have been the position, but then I'm thinking, I think I have that backwards.
Correct.
Oh, never mind, though. No, I do not accept.
No problem.
I had it switched around. So sorry about that.
Okay, so I think we had all those in favor. We need to do all those opposed. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that passes unanimously. Okay, we're gonna move on to item B. Consider the Regional Transportation Safety Plan emphasis areas and priority project locations. Presentation by David Wessel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Cleveland.
Cool.
Sandra and I are having a good time at the conference, learning a lot. So on the transportation safety plan, the progress is being made. Bringing to you today the safety emphasis areas and priority project locations, and looking for an endorsement by the TAC on those. And with those recommendations, or with your endorsement, Greenlight Engineering will develop strategies for the emphasis areas and work on identifying the 5 to 10 projects that from the priority project locations that will be developed for which solutions will be developed. So next slide, please. This is an expansion of something you've seen before, expansion with some more data, specifically the tax survey. What you see in, I think it's the 4th column there, are the emphasis areas: speeding, aggressive driving, distracted driving, and so on. And then a variety of the inputs that we've received, whether it's from the crash data on the left or surveys on the right. Highlighted in green in each of those columns on the right are the top 3 items. In yellow are the next 3, and then in orange are the next 2 in terms of ranking. And you can see there's pretty good consistency across the surveys. And what we're looking for is that kind of rank average that you see on the far right, an endorsement of the safety emphasis areas. And I think what you can see is those top 3 are really focused on behavioral issues. The next 3, which were really where the TAC came in pretty heavy, are more of the engineering issues. And so it's really not too surprising. But I think in my estimation, the top 3, although different in terms of some of their approach, will be handled under more educational campaigns primarily, with some opportunities for enforcement in all those arenas. And then the next 3 are really more associated with engineering solutions that will be tied to capital grants like the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So I think there's kind of room for both categories there. The two that really, I think, warrant a little more discussion are nighttime and weather, and whether or not, pardon the pun, there's enough, if you will, that can be done in these areas, given either dark skies or just the fact that we're in snow country, which drove some of the data, that we would want to make those emphasis areas, or if those are just things that we will deal with as a matter of course. So our recommendation in this emphasis area is really to adopt that rank average on the top, and we will put, that rank average on the far right. And those were the ones that will get strategies from Greenlight Engineering. So I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions or comments related to these rankings and the input that we used.
Doesn't seem like there's any questions or comments.
Okay, let me ask more specifically about weather and nighttime. Does anybody feel like those really ought to be emphasis areas, or is kind of business as usual satisfactory?
And thanks, Dave. This is Anne. I guess to reflect on your question, weather and what was the other one? Sorry.
Nighttime.
Nighttime. Yeah, I think with respect to weather, honestly, it's more about, you can almost be kind of a synopsis of the value of policies around, at least for public entities that allow work from home on, difficult days. Anything we can do in our communities, this is my personal opinion, but also just reflecting on the COVID experience where when people aren't on the roads, there's less, influence for bad accidents. And so if we don't need people on the road on a snowy day, it's helpful for safety overall. So again, maybe that's just maybe it's just a comment or a reflection on the value of some of those policies that at least public entities can manage. Of course, you can encourage that for private sectors, but because obviously schools close and they make those decision points around safety. So I guess it's maybe a little bit of a reflection on that related to weather. And maybe it's helpful when there's a coordinated policies around that, so people aren't in the community dealing with, somebody having to go in and somebody else not going into work. Anyway, that's the only thing I can reflect on that. I don't think the nighttime driving, other than the challenges with lighting versus no lighting, is always the crux of the biscuit there, I think. I guess that's all I can add on that piece of it.
Well, thank you for that comment. And I think there's, as we find ourselves getting more involved in travel demand management, there may be room in that trip reduction efforts to really push that emphasis on safety during certain weather conditions as an opportunity. And we'll share that certainly as a strategy, but perhaps that's not necessarily a priority for us in terms of some of our more focused efforts.
Jeff Bauman has his hand up. Jeff?
Thank you, Dave. I'm looking at this slide, and you've got 5 behavioral and 5 operational, and there's some overlap. And I didn't read a report. If there was a report, I just looked at the packet. Are we limited to this number of emphasis areas, or how did you make the cut to not include the weather in the nighttime? Because those are kind of near and dear in some ways to me. How did you end up here?
It was somewhat subjective, to be honest. I don't know that there was a clear break in the data, but at some point, if we start trying to focus on all 14 of the areas, you get spread pretty thin. They're not really, emphasis areas. But if in your experience there are both the need and prospective strategies for weather and nighttime that you think we really need to be emphasizing, would like to hear more about those things that are near and dear to you.
Yeah, I just see that and I'm just sorting this out a little bit. So the crash and the table that has all the numbers, the crash data ranking has nighttime and weather as number 1 and 2 on the list. So the data says those are our highest concern. And I get that the online survey doesn't represent that, and that's fine. I don't, it's the general public, so they didn't recognize those issues. And I found it interesting. Anne went with kind of education on the weather, and I was going with operations on the weather in my mind. From a city perspective, I mean, we try to do everything everywhere from a city perspective. I'm assuming weather is probably winter weather for the most part.
Yeah.
And we try to do everything everywhere. And so there could be some different approaches taken in the city where we de-emphasize residential streets perhaps and put more emphasis on arterials and the more important busier streets. So I don't know, I think it would be neat to have that discussion. I know Public Works is struggling. All public works agencies are struggling to hire people. I know the city has a serious acute problem that they are going to be talking to the city council about, staffing our plow routes this winter. So this, I don't know if you'll be quick enough, but this discussion may be timely because they're going to have to make some tough decisions for this winter because they're short so many drivers on all their shifts. So I don't know. I kind of like that one. Nighttime. I mean, lighting is. We just changed our engineering standards, and while we're still got our super dark sky standard, we actually are putting better light out on the street. So I'm hopeful that as we change out our system, we're actually going to see some better results out there. So that one's not as critical to me because I feel like we just made a change that's not going to be represented in the data set yet. So that's my pitch on those two.
Well, so what I've heard from an operational side and from a behavioral side, that weather strikes at least 2 of our members as important. Let's see how this flies. Let's go ahead and add weather to the list here and see if that gets support from the entire group. So let's go ahead and I guess, Madam Chair, if we'll take a motion for endorsing the safety emphasis areas to include weather.
Can I get a motion to endorse the safety emphasis areas to include weather?
If I could, Madam Chair.
You may.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to endorse the recommended safety emphasis areas as shown on this slide and add weather as a bonus item.
Bonus.
Okay, so
I'll second.
May I get a second?
I will second.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Oh,
who's the first?
Jeff was the first, Paul seconded. Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Weather has been included.
Excellent. Thank you all. The next item is the priority project locations. There's a couple of slides here put together by Greenlight, and you can see the agency on the left, location, project type, and then the selection method. And I think the methodology here is those items, agency comment, public comment, top crash, hotspot, the number of elements that came to bear on any given location, which led them to be included. There's between this slide and the next slide, there's well over 20 locations. And of those, Greenlight will be producing solutions for 5 to 10 of them. And if upon further analysis, there's systemic patterns that emerge, we may see some solutions, or we should see some solutions for those as well. Today, because I don't think we have the time for the full discussion and evaluation, we'll just have some discussion and input, and then we'll follow up with you outside of this to narrow this down to that 5 to 10. But one of the things that we're interested in, and Mandy, I may call on you to help me with some of the questions Greenlight would like to follow up on. But are some of these already being addressed? Have there been projects already developed? The top of the list, Butler Avenue from I-40 to Mustang Way. Well, we know the widening project is under design, for instance. So any projects that we can remove from these lists would be important. Mandy, other input that Greenlight is looking for?
Yes, they wanted to know if any of the agencies had improvements that they wanted to include, any type of countermeasures that you're already considering for those locations. And then if there are any other potential project locations that your agency may want added to the list.
Okay, great. So you've had time to kind of look through this list. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Here's some additional projects. You can see some that are showing up now in Coconino County. And so what we really would like to discern along with those comments or feedback requested by Greenlight is which of these really rise to the top for us as an organization, for you as a TAC. To assist you with this as you kind of leave the meeting and mull this over, if you can go to the next slide, please. We've taken some of the input and evaluated it against traffic volumes. There was concern expressed by several TAC members on the survey that the equivalent property damage only methodology seemed heavily skewed towards fatal and severe crashes. And so introducing crash rate, looking at just frequency, and then bringing those into this rank of averages. All these next slides have the rank of these averages as the prioritization effort. What you see in yellow, particularly under those right-hand columns, are just highlighting those locations that fell out of the top 10 in their respective categories and moved into the lower ranks. So the weighted severity score rank, for instance, saw a lot of shift in this particular case, where we weighted that, just took that severity score, so that's the equivalent PDO methodology, and weighted that against the volume. And that had a fairly dramatic shift in terms of priorities. So if you'll go to the next slide. These are the intersections within Coconino County. There are only 9 listed, so nothing fell in or fell out as a result, but we did see some shift in the rankings there. Next slide, please. Here's the intersection just for Flagstaff. Again, the shifts that happened as a result. And then I think there's one more slide. here's the segments that were ranked for the entire MetroPlan area. Again, only a top 10, and so no shifts. So don't expect you to digest this in this meeting, but just wanted to make you aware of this. I'll make the full spreadsheet available for those of you who really care to dig deeper into the analysis. But what we'll do is follow up with some of you on paring down that list from Greenlight. They're looking for information or feedback by October 6th, I believe. So any questions or immediate reactions to, if we could maybe go back up to the Greenlight, the first Greenlight slide. Yeah, one more. Oh, go down one. Advance one slide, please.
I think it's just delayed.
Yeah.
Oh. So you guys are seeing the green light slide and I'm not? Is that the issue?
No, it's advanced on Kate's screen, but not for anybody else.
Oh, there it is. Oh, no. There we go. Stop right there. Right there. So just seeing if there's any kind of immediate reaction to some of these, is it feeling like we're headed in the right direction? Are there some that similar to the Butler Avenue, that we have projects that we should pull off?
Can I ask a question about, this is Anne, about the crash types under this? So this first overall list is any kind of crashes, vehicle to vehicle, or is this prioritized based on crashes that involve a pedestrian or a bike?
So the prioritization, you can see that is based on the selection method. So either they're, in the top one, they received agency comments, they received public comments, and it also rated as a top crash hotspot. It happened to be a, crashes related to bicycle pedestrian activity. The second one, similar inputs, put it near the top, and it is an intersection related crash. When you get down to the Snowball Road, this is a road or lane departure type issue, also associated with pavement and maintenance. Does that answer your question, Ann?
Yeah, a little bit. So most of the ones that say intersection are basically improving intersections to help cars. It wasn't so much because of a bike ped conflict.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Jeff, you have your hand up?
I'm sorry, Dave, you said you wanted instant feedback now on this list?
Yeah, just if there's
then
any,
you reach out later?
Yeah, if there's any immediate reactions, we'll take those now, but we also will be reaching out later.
Okay. I mean, I can wait then and not bore everybody with feedback on the list, but we do have a number of projects, and we've made some changes at some of these intersections that, again, aren't represented in a 5-year crash look. So I can give you feedback on that stuff when you reach out.
That'd be great. That would be
Dave,
great.
I heard you throw out in October, I think 6th date. Is that when you need comments by? I know that this is also going to go to, okay. So can you please confirm the date you need everyone to provide their comments to you by?
I'll look to Mandia to help me with that confirmation. It was October 6th.
Yes, October 6th is when Greenlight is asking MetroPlan to deliver any comments to them. So on that day or before would be great.
Yeah. So let's go to the end of this presentation then, if there's no immediate comments. So the project is scheduled to end by December of this year. We have gone to our quarterly TAC meeting. So our next TAC meeting is not until January. So we are proposing to form a project advisory group to see this project to the end, and we'll bring recommendations back to the full TAC in January. So you might have caught the fact that I said I will be following up with some of you. And at this point, we'll take volunteers from the TAC, or if you want to volunteer somebody from your respective staffs, name names, and we will work to either pull that group or pull them together in a meeting to go through that list. So any volunteers or designees to serve on the project advisory group?
Dave, can I just add, and correct me if I'm wrong, the intent is this would be a safety project advisory group that would finish this plan, but then also transition into the vulnerable users?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, that is the intent. This plan will wrap up. The vulnerable road users will be kicking off shortly thereafter, and we'll be ultimately folding the results of the VRU into a singular document, the vulnerable road users safety plan, into a single safety plan. We'll amend it into the document resulting from this effort. So again, looking for volunteers or designees for the project advisory group.
Jeff, are you raising your hand to ask a question or to volunteer?
Neither. I'd like to volunteer some ones.
Perfect.
Hey, Dave, I would like to at least start with David and Chris in my office. They've both been working on the city's annual crash report.
Okay.
And Chris is also working on the state vulnerable user safety plan update. So one or both of those guys would be perfect for these two projects, in my opinion.
Thank you. We will let them know they've been conscripted. Other people, there's Brendan, I know you're there. There's quite a few ADOT locations on this list. Is there somebody either from the district or from traffic safety that you would recommend we reach out to?
I've been thinking about that. To be honest with you, we're kind of shorthanded at the moment, so I need to circle back with my staff and with traffic and just see if anybody has the time to commit to that right now. So let me get back to you.
Okay.
Jeff, would it make sense for Martin to participate from a bicycle pedestrian perspective?
Potentially. So maybe he's in the pool of three with David and Chris, but I don't want to throw three people at this. So yeah, that's a potential, but Chris is covering the state plan for Martin. So Martin, like myself, is trying to step away from a few of these things to free up a few minutes a day.
Yeah. All right. Anybody from the county? I think Jess, you're out there with us today. Anybody from the county that would be either sheriff's office or from Public Works?
You know, we don't have anyone, thanks, dude, and we don't have anyone in community development that really would have a good perspective. Absent Nate today from Public Works, I'd really be relying more on Nate or someone from his staff. I don't know about, we really can't volunteer the sheriff's office, that's for sure.
May not work so
But
well,
we can certainly reach out to the deputy there and see if anyone would like to be on it. So unfortunately, I really don't have a name to give you today. But I'm sure if you email Nate separately, he may be able to provide someone from Public Works.
And then I'm gonna, Jeff Bauman, is it Lieutenant Turley that works with the Traffic Commission or the Bicycle Advisory Commission? From the
Yes, I think reaching out to Ryan Turley would be a good first step.
Okay, we'll do that. And then I noticed there was a couple other names or organizations listed from the survey. I'll work with Mandy. Mandy will be running the vulnerable road users element of this and see if we can't get some names from those other organizations. But we'll try to keep this a relatively small but stalwart working group to get through this by December. Then the last thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the sub-consultant has put together a report summarizing results from the online survey and the social pinpoint exercise that was on our map, and those are available, on our website. Those are available at the website at metroplanflg.org/safety. So with that, I believe that concludes my part of the presentation. We did the safety emphasis areas, and I think I got all the information we can today on the projects. So thank you.
So I think we need to make a second motion to endorse the project locations, or are you telling me we don't need to do that?
We don't need to do that, Madam Chair. I think
Okay.
we will rely on the PAG
Okay.
when we get that together. But thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, we'll move on to item C, consider legislative agenda. Kate.
Great, so I wanted to bring a potential legislative agenda to the TAC for recommendation to the board. October is a good time to set a legislative agenda. Our other partners are starting to draft theirs. And so we can work to make sure that what they draft reflects the things that the TAC and the board want related to transportation. It's also important because it keeps us focused. We know we can set some priorities and stay focused on them rather than trying to chase every little thing and having a diffuse message. We can coordinate that message between agencies and ultimately achieve results. So some of the activities MetroPlan does related to a legislative agenda is seeking funding. That might be through grants, appropriations, smart fund, those types of funding sources. It might be issuing letters on certain topics or related to the federal government potential shutdown and impacts on transportation for that. We can also do resolutions. Usually the board would do that kind of thing to emphasize something they would like to see. And we also just do a lot of communicating with decision makers. So we do meet with elected officials and talk to them about transportation priorities in the region. So this slide, the next two slides are very busy because I just wanted to put them up there for all of you to see. So we have state priorities and federal priorities. The first proposed state priority is related to the SMART Fund, which is state funding available to a variety of entities to match federal funding. So the purpose is to draw down competitive federal funds. That bill was drafted very quickly, shall we say, and I think we're seeing some challenges with it that we'd like to see corrected. Overall, the SMART Fund is a wonderful thing that our partners have probably benefited from more than any other COG or MPO in the state. But we would like to expand the eligibility. So right now they're only allowing cities and counties to apply, but we know that federal grants allow a much wider range of applications. So we'd like to just allow it to be anyone who can apply for the federal funds, apply for the SMART Fund. That would, some missing groups right now of who have particular interest, or Mountain Line would really like to be able to access the SMART Fund. We've heard a lot from tribes, which are currently unable to access the SMART Fund. And a side note, MPOs could access the SMART Fund. We haven't had plans for that, but it could be beneficial. The other piece of the SMART Fund eligibility we want to change is increasing funding levels, and not to leave out the county or anyone else on this, but we do want to focus on cities over 10,000 because that's the pot of money that just is constantly over allocated. So if there's a limited amount of money, trying to prioritize it into that, whereas there are other pots of money that I don't believe there have been any applications for, or very few applications for. So that's number one. Number two is to educate on the benefits of the Greater Arizona Funding Initiative, or also known as the RTAC bill. The TAC recommended the projects you see to the board last month, and then the board did approve them. So those are officially MetroPlan's asks under the RTAC bill, which is state appropriations money. The third bullet is continue to seek long-term funding solutions for insufficient state transportation revenue. So this is just a general one. RTAC is also generally pursuing this, and so we wanted to reflect continuing to educate people on the issues and challenges that our transportation industry is facing. And then finally, the last one is to monitor and educate on the importance of regional projects in the state highway system, such as the bike and ped improvements on Milton. I know that was something that you had put in, you and Jason James had worked to get into the P2P list, and I think it ended up falling out, if I remember correctly. So making sure that we continue to advocate for our regional projects that are on the state highway system to be funded. So I'll pause on state priorities to answer any questions, or if you think we're missing something that we should be advocating for, would love to hear that as well. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move to federal priorities. And I should have said at the beginning, I did reach out to the city and county and Mountain Line to see what was on their radar for legislative priorities and putting this together. So the first one is to support the reauthorization and sustained funding of the IIJA. We all know how valuable that's been. I can't believe we're multiple years into it. It feels like the grant programs are just starting. It's scary to think that they would go away without enough time to really go after them. So that's a big one. Expand eligibility of the carbon reduction program and transportation alternatives program to allow for staff delivery of programs. So both these grant programs allow programmatic activities to occur instead of just capital activities to occur. MetroPlan receives carbon reduction programming. A year ago, the board approved hiring a staff position to write a plan and implement programs with the TDM planner, the Transportation Demand Management Planner position. FHWA has now said we cannot hire that position, but we could contract for that position. So obviously it's far cheaper for us to just be able to hire a staff person than contract to a consulting firm. It's also hard to find a consultant in a town like Flagstaff who would do transportation programs. So we'd really like to see flexibility in that. The goal isn't to hire staff. The goal is to deliver the eligible activities, and some of the activities require staffing. So would love to, that would be at the federal level, changing those eligibility requirements. Support the award of funding for regional projects submitted for federal grants. So that's just continuing to work, and in particular with Bob Holmes, who represents many of your agencies, to advocate for the grants that we've written and submitted to try to get them funded. Let's see, we also have the fourth bullet, support an effort to modernize car safety ratings to consider vulnerable users. This is an effort that's happening at the federal level right now. It aligns with our safety plans and vulnerable users plan. And so just continuing to support the update of the ratings. Also looking to support updates to the MUTCD and federal standards to do to modernize some of the codes. They're the federal government. It takes them a long time to update things, so we'd love to see some of those updates move forward. This is really related to goals around multimodal and safety improvements. And then finally, the last one is to support any congressionally directed spending asks for transportation projects. So those usually come out in the spring, and our partners, ask for funding from their congressional representatives. We'll work to support anything that's related to transportation. That's much broader than transportation. So I don't know that there will be transportation projects, but if there are. So I'm happy to answer any questions on federal priorities. I see Myrna has her hand up.
Okay. In the previous slide, can you scroll up, please?
Yes.
that last bullet item to reopen parks and Christensen rest areas. So right now, both of those rest areas are in a design build project to be converted to truck parking only. There's really no opportunity to open those two locations to the general public at this time. And once they're converted to truck parking, it would be very difficult to remove spaces from the trucks to convert it back to cars. So is that what you're looking for, to reopen it to the general public as well as trucks?
This one was a request of the county. And Dave, unless you know off the top of your head, I may have to follow up if they feel satisfied with the truck parking only or really advocating for something else.
That would be great, because actually, like I said, it's on a design build project, so they're going to move very fast. We're actually looking at potentially moving dirt by the end of fiscal year 24. So that would be sometime next year.
Great, that is good info, and I will follow up with them.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Dave. I don't have anything to add to that.
I don't see any other. We are looking, I believe, yeah, we are looking at the recommend the board adopt these. Can I get a motion for staff to recommend the TAC? Can I get a motion, sorry, that the TAC recommend the board adopt proposed legislative priorities? I'm assuming as presented. Yeah, okay, as presented. Myrna?
Yes.
You have your hand, oh, I'm sorry, you had your hand up? Or was that
Oh,
just
no,
a-
I'm sorry. I just didn't lower it. I'm sorry.
That's
we
no
go.
problem at all. I thought you were jumping the gun to pass that motion.
No, I just keep forgetting that I need to lower my hand in Teams.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Can I ask a question before I'll make a motion?
Yeah.
Were those prioritized, or is that just a list? Just a list. Okay. Would there be any desire to prioritize those, or is it going to go into a larger hopper with other legislative priorities at the city? And okay.
So this would be MetroPlan's legislative priorities. I don't think we have to do priorities within it, but yes, I think ultimately, you know, if there's a transportation project for congressionally directed spending and there's a housing project, the city will have to prioritize which one they're going to really pursue.
Yeah, thanks. And this is Anne, so moved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I get a second?
This is Jess, second.
Thanks, Jess. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we have an information item. Moving on to item D, strategic grants process, and I don't know if that will be Sandra or Dave. Yay, Sandra.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is originating from our strategic advance that we hosted in May that many of you attended. So next slide, please. So our strategic priorities are to maximize funding, right? So with the IIJA and the BIL and all of these, I'm at a conference with Dave in Cleveland for AMPO, the Association for Metropolitan Planning Organizations. And the thing that I hear repeatedly from FHWA officials is that right now is an unprecedented moment in transportation vis-a-vis federal assistance dollars. So we really want to take advantage of those dollars for our region. And so we want to align our capital and programmatic needs with priorities and fund sources. And we want to expand our match and revenue generating options. Next slide, please. So we want to make a paradigm shift right now. We want to move from reactive to proactive fund seeking. So we want to get ahead of the curve and our goal is really to get about 18 months ahead of grant cycles so that we have our projects prioritized and listed out and we have our information ready. I have had a recent experience writing a Protect grant to help out the flood control district, and it was a big deadline window. Like they gave us like 45 days, which is kind of a lot to turn in the grant. And it was so meaty. It needed a BCA. It needed all this data from engineering and hydrology. So with that experience, Kate and I were like, wow, it would be really cool if we could work well ahead of these grant deadlines so that we could submit just beautiful applications in a coordinated manner and get that money. Next slide, please. So here is my approach to creating a strategic grant seeking process with y'all, with our partners, right? So we want to collect all the projects, the transportation related projects, funded and unfunded. Then I have had some stakeholder meetings, but I really want to go on a listening tour with all of our partners so you can help me fashion this process and tell me what's important to you, and then analyze that alignment. And so I guess our ask, even though this is for information purposes only, I'm going to be asking you for a list, if I haven't already, for all funded and unfunded transportation projects, and also making time in your schedule for these stakeholder meetings. So that's my request. Next slide, please. So once that happens, once I collect the list and have my stakeholder meetings, then I'll walk you through what I imagine this will look like, right? So develop scoring criteria, right? So right now, a lot of federal assistance grants are really looking at the collaborative aspect of a project. Do you have skin in the game, right? So the collaborative potential. Is there match? Project readiness. And so what I'm kind of stoked about is that this process that I'm naming off right now is really what I'm hearing from all of these FHWA folks that I'm listening to at this AMPO conference. So this is really what our funders are looking to fund, right? So project readiness, scope, timeline, vision, and political overlay. So excuse me, sorry. So then after we decide what our scoring criteria is, then we can create and finalize, I can create and finalize a process, present it to the board and TAC for adoption, and then roll it out to our partners. Next slide, please. So now we have a process. So the future process is gonna look like this, but there's nothing in it right now because it's still information. The next step is nothing, just kidding. Okay. So then we're going to do a kickoff, right? So we've collected this information. I've had the stakeholder meetings. I've analyzed. I've come up with scoring. Oh, collectively, of course. This is just not just me. Then we'll have a kickoff, right? So something that I learned in assisting with the Protect grant is that to connect subject matter experts early, your NAU Economic Policy Institute teams and the engineering teams and the hydrology teams, whatever subject matter experts are needed, connecting them early and, looping in ADOT early, and then assigning roles, because writing these big federal grants, it's a big deal. So there's narrative, there's budget, there's timeline, there's so many components, and getting those squared away early. And then after that, really continuously engaging with these teams so that we are ready for submission. And I think that's it. I think that's, yeah. So that is what I'm envisioning as the process. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
And thanks, Sandra. I love your outline here. I mean, I go back to any time you're trying to work with large groups of people, and this happens on other types of projects besides developing big grants, getting that high level, sort of like the chartering aspect to the delivery, right? You're delivering a grant, 18 months later, is getting whoever's on board, getting sign off by those groups that they're going to have the staff available, the capacity, clearing the path on those approvals is always honestly the biggest challenge of any, complex project, whether it's a construction project or a grant project. So I guess I would encourage you to figure out a way to really look for those critical moments in your grant development process where you're going to need, let's say, I'll just use like an example. Maybe it's mountain line. Maybe it's potentially, maybe there needs to be certain things mountain line needs to do to clear the path to be able to give you information, whether that goes up to their board or whatnot. I mean, I guess I think about that because I think it's always the challenge of this interagency collaboration on getting these grants applied and then committed, and then obviously delivery is another whole component. But actually, that's probably, I would imagine, another component of partners on a grant all have to be on the same page on how it's going to get delivered, and that responsibility. So just food for thought there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. And that really aligns with when I first started working at MetroPlan and I talked to you, you said that too. So clearing the path, I really hear you loud and clear. And I agree because I've had experience with that. So thank you. Anybody else? Myrna.
So the other thought, and it's just kind of like a follow up on what Anne is saying, is perhaps select projects that study or a feasibility study's already been done on. So a lot of the information that you are looking for might already been done and it's already in the report. Either that, or if you are planning on identifying a specific project, then to do a feasibility study on it, because you'll even have potential cost estimates included with that construction, for instance, then that way you'll have a lot of that information ready to go when you're getting ready to produce that grant.
Yes, thank you. I love that.
So I noticed in your earlier slide, it might have been the one before this. I think it was the one before the blank one. So project readiness, and I'm hearing what Myrna and Anne are saying, and to me, project readiness is that you've almost had a Pell or some other study so that it wouldn't be something out of the blue. But I guess just hearing their comments and just wanting to make sure, what is your definition of readiness?
Well, thank you for asking that question. My first instinct to answer that is to follow the NOFO, right? Whatever the notice of funding opportunity is really your guide to having a really wonderful application, and whatever they consider project readiness, it differs a little bit from between NOFO to NOFO. So for, I guess I'll cite my most recent example with the Protect grant, is their project readiness was, oh my gosh, my mind is completely blanking. I'm so sorry. So yeah, whatever is in the NOFO, sometimes they want like an environmental, they want a NEPA, they want a Pell. It really depends on the funder and what the NOFO is asking. So I think readiness is defined on a case-by-case basis depending on what the funder wants to see. And also like a lot, like testing the logic, right? Like as a region, as partners, like, are we ready to execute and by when? And that goes into like timeline and scope and stuff. So this is a wordy answer, but maybe that's helpful.
It was very helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, everybody. More to come on that. Please brace yourselves for giving me your list of funded and unfunded projects and making some time to speak with me. Thank you so much. And I'm going to transition now to creative local match option. So to refresh your memory, I was originally hired to write a white paper on creative local match options because of the BIL and the IIJA increase in federal dollars. And so what I've done earlier in the summer is made a list of 10 options, and then I'm flushing each one out to both be relevant to our region as well as nationally. So I chose Transportation Reinvestment Zone, TRZ. So if you don't mind, I am going to share my screen with this one pager, and it's, you know what, it's kind of little, like it's a little, the font is small, but I will walk you through it. All right. Is this even worth looking at? Should I blow it up? Can you see it?
There you go.
All right. So what is this is fascinating. So a transportation reinvestment zone, I find just so interesting. And here's why. The transportation reinvestment zone is a discrete area that a region decides is rife for economic development. It is a new area that is projected to grow economically. And the TRZ zone is founded on a TIF, a tax increment financing, okay? So tax increment financing is used by almost every state in the union besides Arizona to fund major infrastructure projects that are larger than transportation. So tax increment financing looks at the future economic development of a region's infrastructure and takes those property and sales taxes and devotes them to that infrastructure over time. That's TIF. And then TRZ isolates those revenues to just transportation, okay? So a TRZ is a contiguous area around a transportation project designated by a local government as an impact zone. It's an area where the future local property and or sales tax revenues resulting from that growth will be kind of wrangled and used to finance the transportation project. So it's an economic development tool. What does it do? So what transportation reinvestment zone financing does is it wrangles that tax revenue to pay for a transportation project. And that means that you can leverage and free up your other dollars, your grant monies, your planning funds, your local match, because you're using this tax revenue. It's not new, it's existing property and sales tax, and you're reinvesting it into the project. So it leverages funds. It allows you to use other dollars, which is kind of the same thing as leveraging funds. And it, the cool thing about it is that it has a lifespan. It's finite. So it pays for the transportation project until the project is executed, and then you can use that tax increment financing for another reason. So this is a little confusing because it's like there's tax increment financing and transportation reinvestment zone. So let's think of TIF, tax increment financing, as a foundation that the TRZ sits upon to wrangle that sales and property tax revenue to pay for a discrete transportation project, but you have to have that tax increment financing foundation. Part of my role in analyzing these creative local match options is what kind of enabling legislation does it really take to do this? So it's a little ironic because in Arizona, tax increment financing got eliminated in 1999, but I'm curious. What struck me as curious is this white paper I'm writing has to be applicable nationally, but also regionally. And so I don't want to pick an option that's like, well, it's illegal in Arizona. Good night, everybody. But I think it's interesting because if it was outlawed or made illegal in 1999, it's now 2023, right? It's a new day. It's a new time. And so are our legislators ready to maybe entertain resurrecting it? Because Arizona is the only state in the union that doesn't use this like amazing tool to partially fund infrastructure projects. And we know that we need infrastructure dollars, right? So here are some considerations to ask oneself, depending on where you are. Is it legal in your state? So based on my research, Texas and Utah use transportation reinvestment zones really heavily. Texas specifically has really taken this TRZ model in the last decade and done some really cool stuff with it. So there's the state issue, the state legality issue, then the local. So once it becomes legal in your state, then you can really invoke your local legislators and your local government to identify a TRZ zone and start that process. So there's of course details, right? Like is your regional transportation plan, is the project in there? Kind of like a tip situation, right? Does it need to be in the statewide plan? Those kind of bureaucratic compliance related considerations. So I'm going to move on to barriers. So right now, Arizona doesn't allow it, but I've talked to our lobbyist and I want to ask her, like, you know, she's willing to kind of take the temperature of our state legislators to see if they're into it, or like, is it a hard pass? Sorry, I'm futzing with my screen. I'm so sorry. Okay, revenue. So this funding mechanism is a partial funding mechanism. None of these creative local match options that I've researched thus far pay for something completely. It's all part of kind of a puzzle piece of funding. So it's a component of funding. So it's not the whole kit and caboodle, right? And it sunsets when the project is completed. What's cool about TRZ and TIF is that it's not no new taxes. It's taking existing property and sales tax and reinvesting it back into the project. Pros, the positives, it promotes economic development. There's been really cool things happening in Texas and Utah where they're taking kind of underdeveloped areas or transportation disadvantaged areas and really developing them and rehabbing them. And even here in Cleveland, I'm staying here in Cleveland, and they've done some really amazing things at reusing public space. Dave had a really cool term. He called it something adaptive reuse of public lands, and it's really cool. Another cool thing that transportation reinvestment zones does is it promotes collaboration among various stakeholders. So we keep hearing this idea of a lot of skin in the game and a lot of partners in the game, and this model absolutely does that. I mentioned this earlier, I think I'm repeating myself a little bit, but when you identify a transportation reinvestment zone, you really, as a region and as a local government, you really have a chance to do some really cool economic development projects in your region that you know, with land that has been neglected or needs to be revitalized. It gives government some choice in terms of like what they want to develop, and then it's finite. Once the legislation takes effect, TRZ funding seems to be more easily obtainable and quicker than other kinds of funding, right? And that is if your legislation is indeed enabled. So once, let's pretend here. Let's pretend Arizona makes it legal. Let's pretend our region picks some areas. So it's like, what's next? How do we do this? So we define the transportation need and the proposed improvement. We define the boundaries. We establish terms. We establish a base year to calculate the taxes. Establish terms for sharing the property tax, and then, of course, engaging the public. So that is my one pager for TRZ. Do we have any questions or comments?
Ann? Oh, Mirna has her hand up. Then we'll go to you, Ann.
Hi, so the only difference that I see between the TRZ and the TIF as compared to, say, what Maricopa County is doing with a half-cent sales tax, because obviously the half-cent sales tax is what's funded a majority of the infrastructure in Maricopa County, and you know, the freeways and highways. So the only thing that I see that's different is that the half-cent sales tax and that manages is additional money. So you're saying that this is not additional taxes? Oh, and by the way, the half-cent sales tax, of course, is also has to be passed by voters. So, and so would you be presenting this to the voting public, or are you going to, who are you going to approach to carve out a certain portion of taxes to for this funding source?
Okay, thank you, Myrna. I hear two questions. One is, are you sure this is no new taxes? And if it's not no new taxes, what is it? That's your first question. Your second question is, what kind of legislation are you going to bring this to the voters? What are you doing? Okay, so am I paraphrasing your questions correctly? Okay, so
Thank you for that, by the way. You worded that so much better than I did.
So for your first question, my understanding is this, and remember, I'm like a brand new baby to tax increment financing. So like, please bear with me. So
You're doing great for a brand new baby. So yeah.
thank you so much. And just so y'all know, it's like 5:45 in Cleveland. So I'm like super jet lagged and there's a big time difference. So no new taxes. So from what I understand, anytime a new economic development area is decided upon, it already has taxes embedded in it, right? There's already sales tax and property tax that are going to be born from this development. So it's taking those existing taxes and deciding to put a portion of them into the project. So the project, the economic development project and zone is already generating taxes. So you take those already generated taxes and decide that you're going to devote some of it to transportation. And you're right, that is a legislative issue. So my first, Dave, I see your hand. Let me try to answer Myrna's second question. So legislatively, right now, for Arizona and for our region, I'm just kind of poking a sleeping bear, talking to our lobbyists to see if the legislators are cool even backing this. And then we would engage in a kind of formal thing. And you're right, it would absolutely go to a local vote. So thank you for bringing that up. Did I somewhat address your questions? Right on. Thank you. Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Just to maybe add a little more clarification. So the idea is you're going to invest in this geographic area with transportation, and it is going to spur additional value, both in sales tax revenue and perhaps property tax revenue as so you're leveraging that value. And so it's the increment that gets funded. So you might be collecting, say, $10 a year in sales and property taxes. And because of this investment, we see those taxes go up to $30 a year. So now you've got a $20 increment, and you can use that. It's tax increment financing. You can use that mechanism to finance the transportation improvement. So you could bond for that and then take that funding stream to pay off the debt that built the transportation improvement.
Dave,
so that's a little bit different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what Dave said.
And did you still have a question? Oh.
Sorry, I had the same thought as Michelle.
I think I'm trying to read, now that I've listened to the first couple and the responses, assuming the barrier of a legislative issue could potentially assuming it could become legal in Arizona, one question I actually have from a high level about the city, and I get that it would be no new taxes, but we all know there's competition for every one of those tax dollars that currently comes in. So to look at, to me, I see like two things from a city process maybe, and even a TIA type process. How do you then determine, the local city groups have to figure out, okay, well, if there's a TIZ here, they're going to do this special project, and then instead of collecting $100 that goes to the sales tax and however it's split out over the city standard budget process, there's like a component of it that's going to go to this special project. So that obviously would have a big process to decision, how to prioritize what the city's going to give up or have to find that shell game. I don't want to say shell game, but they're trying to find other ways to backfill the lack of that money. So I see that as, but not obviously other groups do it. So there has to be great peer opportunities to learn from these other communities that have the same challenges with funding. How do they get by, deal with that? The other one is the TIA process. For example, if a group comes in and they want to build, typically, oftentimes there are required public improvements, right? Now, I would imagine, again, if theirs is just a component of a larger project, how does it work? I mean, I guess by having the TIZ would actually maybe make it easier to, I mean, would the city be able to still approve projects knowing that the project for the transportation is going to happen in the future? I mean, a little bit of that,
Typically,
that's challenging. But
Dave
anyway,
has his hand up.
yeah, I think those are my two.
As Dave says, the increment of the new taxes
Yes.
generated. So typically, the idea is, let's say you're gonna invest in a light rail, and then you assume the light rail is gonna result in TOD. And then the TOD would have a higher tax generation rate than whatever was there originally. So it's just, I forget where I was going with that, but it's not, it's like the transportation project is what spurs the development to occur.
The value, you're capturing future value, but what,
So you have to estimate what you think the future taxes will be to pay off your, like you said, your bonds.
so there, the risk is that there isn't the development that comes through that pays for the increased sales revenue. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Yeah, if I could add to that very briefly. So the assumption is, yes, the development doesn't occur without the investment. And quite often what we see in that development agreement process is there's a proportional share from the developer that is not sufficient to pay for the entire improvement. And there may be a public share that's out there. Well, the public doesn't have the money in hand. But if it takes this tax increment financing approach, it could, with risk, say, we're going to take the taxes, the increment in taxes based on this improvement, and this is going to be our contribution to the share. So you may get a chunk of change up front from the developer to kind of pay your down payment, if you will, and then finance the balance using the tax increment financing.
For a local example, I think JWP could be something, right? There's not much development out there, but if the city goes to invest and you had a zone around it, you could then take the money from that geographic region and pay it off. And once it's paid off, you can go back to paying fire and police. But there's no fire and police until you pay transportation.
Well, I thank you for all of your questions and comments.
Sorry, Sandra, I was waiting for everybody else. I never know how the order of this should go, but as you're looking, I guess just a couple thoughts. I think part of the issue with the TIF is the gift clause. So if any legislator is going to take on TIF and making it legal, I think there needs to be a lot of analysis at a state and local level in the interpretation of the gift clause. And I think that that's just something that I know could be an issue. And especially because different communities, different cities actually interpret it much more conservatively than others. And I think Flagstaff, I would say that I think we're very conservative in how we interpret that. And so just something to consider. And then, TIFs are definitely something that we talk a lot about with affordable housing and other economic development opportunities. Currently, I know that we have the giblets, and I think that that's more property and can't be used for, it's a tax incentive that we can use, I think, for property, but not necessarily for transportation. And I know that the state has kind of changed the rules on that and really watered it down, and it's not as effective. But really where I'm going with this is I think there's a lot of other groups that would get behind advocating for TIFs. Anybody in the housing community, especially affordable housing, anybody in economic development, I think you could get a big group of people who maybe that you should talk to outside of just transportation that would be really interested in that being something that could be legalized, just to make it easier or less of a load or more support. And then have you looked at the MAPS program? It's the metropolitan area, I think, metropolitan area programs in Oklahoma and what they did with the 1% tax or the 1 cent tax. So So Oklahoma City actually, it was like in 1993, they actually identified quality of life projects It was mostly for like infrastructure, like their arena and fairgrounds and different things like that, as well as other social programs. But they taxed them, they identified very specific projects. They taxed themselves 1 cent, which is really a 1% tax. And when they had the funding for each of these projects, they went ahead and went for it. So it was a additional tax, but it was relatively small because it was sales tax. I mean, I guess that's who you're asking, but it was really for these identified projects. And once those projects were finished, the tax ended. But they've actually, I think they're on their like 4th rendition of it because it's been so wildly successful that they just passed their 4th amendment to it. I don't know if a similar thing could be used for street road projects, but it's a pretty interesting model. And it was really successful there.
Cool, thank you. So I'm hearing, Chair McNulty, 2 things. Did you call it a gift clause? Like I'm
Gift.
giving you a gift?
Yes.
Okay, gift clause, and then look at the Oklahoma model as a resource. And
Yeah.
then also work with various stakeholders, not just in transportation, in housing, and other interest groups that would really be into this tax increment financing.
100%. And I think even when I say that, like Habitat for Humanity, others that are trying to fund big projects and just are looking at different funding mechanisms, they might have some insight. So.
Right on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right, I think are there any other questions, comments? Okay, we're going to move on to mission. Consider our mission, vision, and values.
Thank you. So a little bit of background, our current mission and vision are up on the screen for you to read. And they were adopted in 2017. So while MetroPlan was still housed within the city of Flagstaff, they remained with the organization through the transition to independence.
I'd just like to note, I'm sorry, before you continue.
Yeah.
Jess McNeely had his sign on.
Thank you.
As well as Sandra.
Okay, perfect, thank you. You guys can see the screen, right?
And Dave.
Hang on, I gotta get on these people. All right, go ahead.
Think they can see the screen? Okay, so that's the background of where the mission vision came from. So to create the finest transportation system in the country and then leverage cooperation to maximize financial and political resources for a premier transportation system. So we've had some feedback and discussion over the last couple of years about defining what the finest transportation system is, or what a premier transportation system is. This has been in the strategic plan, I think for at least 2 years before I got to MetroPlan, and something that we didn't really ever get to clearly defining. The RTP took a little bit of a look at it, but didn't really flesh it out. So then, so we also need to clearly tell the public and our partners who we are, what we do. And in my listening tour with stakeholders here in the room, but also community members, people were very confused on what MetroPlan was supposed to be doing and what our role was and how it did or didn't overlap with our partner agencies. And then finally, we wanted to help us get clear on transportation system values related to the strategic grants process that Sandra just mentioned. If we can get really clear on what that finest transportation system is, what those values are, that can help us set priorities in the region. So staff spent some hours together drafting up some ideas. So the board told us to take a stab and bring them a couple options. They didn't want to workshop it. We'll see if they agree after they see these, or if then they want to workshop it. But staff came up with a couple things. And what I highlight, they're actually very similar. And what I highlighted on there is actually the difference really between the two. So some of it is just in the way we phrase it. Do we start with our vision? Is that the region will be joined? Or do we just jump in without restating that piece? And then the key difference here is the second one includes this idea of an efficient transportation system. But I think it created some questions for us, much like a premier transportation system. What exactly is an efficient transportation system? Is it speed? Is it cost effective? What exactly does that mean? And does it conflict with some of the other values of the organization? And what we were consistent in is prioritize a transportation system that prioritizes the well-being of people in the environment. And so we originally started down a path of listing all the values. It's, you know, a transportation system that is safe, reliable, multimodal, environmentally friendly. We ended up with like 20 things on the list that the finest transportation system was, economic development, et cetera. And we felt like the well-being of people in the environment captured all of them. So we said, well, is economic development here? Yeah, we think that's really the core, is the well-being of people, right? You know, one of our board members really wants to make sure we talk about habitat connectivity. Well, the well-being of the environment can get to that, and it can get to goals around climate action. So we thought it kind of summarized all these values pretty succinctly. So I'm going to stop before we get. I'm trying to think. Do you guys want to see mission first, or just stop at vision, or you want to see the whole package?
My part of me wants to like dig in now,
Yeah.
but I feel like maybe if we see the whole
Okay,
package.
and then go back. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so mission. We came up with 3 ideas for mission, and this one's not to confuse you, but it is late in the day, so to keep you on your toes. This time I've highlighted the pieces that are the same, not different, because there's a lot of overlap in them. We really started at this one. This is where we wanted to get clear about what we do. And so we came up with 4 things that are our priority areas. And they also tie back to our strategic plan, which is nice. And so 1, we're responsible for doing planning. 2, we need to help do some priority setting around the use of funding. 3, we want to pursue the funding. So we heard loud and clear in our listening tour that people would like to see us do more than just send out NOFOs. We want to actively pursue the funding. And then 4 is this idea of demand management programs, which is kind of the gap that other partners aren't doing, is some of the programmatic pieces like Safe Routes to School programming or events, education, those kinds of things. There's some of those things going on, but nobody really has the resources to dive in deep. And this is where that carbon reduction program money and the TDM planner comes in. We still have a path forward of hiring a consultant to implement these things for us. So still are looking to pursue that. So those were the 4 things that you'll see throughout the 3 different items, because we used different words for them at different times, but those were the 4 things that we felt like we're supposed to do, or to get clear about what we do. And then values. So transportation values, these are new to us. We have guiding principles right now, which is more about how we behave as an organization. We treat people with respect, those kinds of things. But we thought having transportation values would help us with that priority setting and getting clear about what we're trying to achieve in the system, kind of getting to that defining the finest transportation system, even though it wouldn't be part of our mission vision anymore. So these came from the advance. So if you may recall, we did the workshop on West 66, where we used West 66 as an example to have people draw or talk about what they would like to see out there, and then we kept asking why you thought those things were important. So for example, if somebody said, well, we need a sidewalk. Well, why is the sidewalk important? Because some people walk. Well, why is it important to ensure that some people can walk? You know, kept drilling down until we got to root causes like you see on the screen. Like it's important for health. It's important for social connection, for environmental stewardship, those things. So we felt like these summarized all those points that we heard in that exercise. So that's the package, now that you've seen the package. And we'll go back to vision. There's no action today. This is just feedback for us. You can tell, it's fine. You won't hurt our feelings if you tell us you hate it. You can also tell us you love it. That's great too. And we'll take feedback on if you prefer one versus the other, or you think we got a verb wrong. But ultimately the board will still see several examples, and we will give them your feedback in reviewing the examples.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
For environment, I'm assuming that it means natural environment and not built. And I'm just wondering if you could clarify. Or does it mean both? Because I think of environment as both.
I think we were envisioning natural environment when we wrote it, but we could either clarify or decide that it also means
Yeah.
built environment.
Okay.
Is anybody like, wow, you nailed it, or no, I hate your vision for.
Well, just a comment, I guess I'm just kind of reacting and trying to take it in. I think you got to the heart of the why. I mean, why transportation? Honestly, why does it matter? It's because of, like people need to make their, live their lives, and it is, so I appreciate it. You get down to the well-being of people and the environment. I think it's a good comment to clarify what environment we're talking about. So I guess I would think it would be a natural environment that we're creating our transportation infrastructure on, but yeah. So I like that you got down to the kind of the why of transportation, kind of in the vision, so.
I guess also, would it be good to clarify a multimodal transportation system? Because as it's written, I think it's just, to me, that's more focused on, we're gonna design for cars, but for the well-being of people, and just curious.
So maybe adding, if we were looking at number 1, our region joined together by a multimodal transportation system that prioritizes the well-being of people and the natural environment.
That's what I would suggest.
Excellent.
That's great.
Any other thoughts on vision? And you can, I know it's a lot to think about in the moment, so you can feel free to email me afterwards too if you think of things. Okay, how about mission? I think this one feels really important to me in terms of, is it clear what MetroPlan does? Can we, if the public looks at our website and sees our mission, do they know what we're doing?
For number 1, I guess I would add to inspire better transportation options. I don't know why, when I just hear transportation, I just think it's very singular.
Yeah, so same kind of comment we
Yeah.
should talk about. Yeah. Multimodal.
I don't know if the public's gonna know what demand management programs are. That's a really technical, wonky term, frankly.
The second one, we put mode choice as an attempt at it, but we didn't know if that was much better.
So, mode choice, yeah.
I think 3 actually is the most clear when you. I guess for clarification of the mission statements, it's going to be 1. We have 1 mission.
One mission, yeah.
I like that one. It would fit in many of these situations.
All right. We don't have to, if anyone's still thinking it through.
Brendan, do you have any thoughts? Put you on the spot. So quiet.
Paul, Jeff, or Mirna? Oh, sorry.
The one thing that kind of begs it a little bit is the principled planning. I say that because we've all got principles, but mine certainly might be different than what yours are. So
Yeah.
That's probably why I'm not saying a whole lot, because
We don't have to use that
Metro
word.
Plan is, I have different goals than what mine are, so.
But I do hope that the things we put up here are things that the partners do feel aligned around. And I think if you're like, this is way off from what the district wants, I'd love to hear
I
it.
don't think it's way off.
Okay.
Putting the word principle in there just kind of
That's an easy one
I
to
think it
strike.
leaves things open a little bit.
Best practices planning? I guess by nature of doing planning professionally, should be implied that it's best practices, but.
Or maybe it's just professional planning. Because the principle kind of struck me, it did something to me too. But I think that it's, I guess if there needs, in my mind, I feel like it needs to be a word choice replacement.
I think one of the biggest differences for me between 2 and 1 and 3 is 1 and particularly 3 is 3 has all these, I guess, adjectives for the 4 different things we're doing, or, you know, the enthusiastic pursuit of funding. Do those add anything, or are they just distracting? And the more simple version, in terms of those components, is just clear. Like, does it have to be any kind of planning or just planning?
Me personally, I'm glad you brought that up because I like 2 the best.
There's
Simple and
an opinion.
straightforward.
All right, or this week. It's my favorite. With advancing multimodal transportation.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the addition of that, I can see that too.
You're good with that, right?
And I think mode choice might have a little easier explanation for the public versus demand management programs.
I agree.
I did actually get some feedback that after we wrote these, the demand management, transportation demand management has a bad vibe in town.
Oh, yeah. I think somewhere at the state level, I mean, just from a legislative.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not ADOT state.
Not
like
yeah.
legislatures.
Those other people.
Yeah.
Elected. Just not many people. All right, well, if anyone has additional comments on those, I think that's really good feedback. And then curious, so what we would want to do with the transportation values is really use them to start guiding, you know, some of the prioritization. So I could see, as Sandra works on the strategic grants process, that these start to become ways that we're ranking or prioritizing projects for funding. So if there's 3 different potential raise grant applications, we look at the values and say, okay, which is, you know, which is really a priority here. And so I guess I'm curious, did we get them right? Are there things missing? These were, like I said, these were things that came out of the whys of the back to the advance. Like I said, you can email me afterwards as well if you think of anything. All right. Well, shall we, that's all we have for mission, vision, values.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We're going to move on to item G, MetroPlan happenings.
Okay, so there are some other happenings in your packet, but a couple things we just wanted to highlight really briefly. National Week Without Driving is October 2nd, 2nd through 8th.
That's Monday.
Yeah, that's next week. So go sign up at America Walks, and we challenge all of you. The idea, this is a disability awareness campaign. The idea is not to be perfect at it if you can't be perfect at it, but to try it as much as you can and see what the challenges of living life and getting around town with a disability are. The Rural Transportation Summit is then the week of October, well, it is October 18th and 19th. So this is the big Arizona transportation summit, not like roads and streets, not the engineering side, but more the legislative side. So we'll be speaking about the RTAP projects. We will bring down posters and have a presentation. There is a little bit of technical discussion, but it's much more on the funding side of things. So if anyone's interested in that, I definitely recommend it. It's also a great way to meet state legislators. They are there and ready to talk transportation.
Phoenix?
It's in Yuma.
Oh.
Hopefully it'll be more
Yuma.
central next year. Actually, I think next year they're planning on Prescott, so that it's much
good.
more convenient for people who want to go to Prescott. And then, okay, so, and then the final thing I wanted to talk about was, so the board also concurred to go to 4 TAC meetings a year. So a couple of changes that you'll see. If you go to the very back of your packet, you will see we have included a very draft agenda. It's agenda topics of what the board will have at their meeting next week. We're still finalizing their packets. When packets go out, hopefully on Friday, we will copy all of you so that you can see in all the staff reports and get everything that the board gets. And I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the topics once you get them so that you can also speak with your representatives. The management committee also meets the day, or will also continue to meet before board meetings. They typically meet the Thursday before the board meeting, so that's usually the day after our TAC meeting, so tomorrow. So they will also see and discuss and hear what's on the board's agenda. So as I said, this was an effort to alleviate calendars, not to cut you off. And so we're trying to do our best to make sure you have access to those things. With that, we know we've done a bunch of calendar shuffling, but we're going to do it again. We're going to cancel the TAC meeting invites and send you new invites for when there's actually TAC meetings. Then we're also going to send you placeholders for PAG meetings. And for now, even if you know you're not going to be on the PAG, we just request that you hold the time on your calendar. And then when we get closer each month, we will tell you what PAG is meeting. So right now we only have a West 66 PAG, but as we talked about, we're going to form a safety PAG. So until we know who's on that other PAG, it'd be good if you could hold that space. And then if you're not on any PAGs, you could probably delete it. But
Do you plan on meeting? Do you plan on the PAGs meeting here as well?
so that was something we wanted to chat about. We could hold them over at Mountain Line. We could talk to ADOT about holding them. This has been relatively convenient. I don't know if people want to do this because it's more central, but if that's also hard because you and Jeff won't be in the PAGs, we can find other helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't mind if it's on one of our agendas. I guess let's talk offline
Okay.
because I don't know if there's any like rules about that. Because
Oh, if you're not
theoretically
actually in
there
it,
should be a city employee that always in PAG.
hopefully.
So I would feel like that would be fine, but yeah. it's fine.
Okay, sounds good. And so with that, that means that you all don't have a TAC meeting until January. So that doesn't mean you're free of MetroPlan, no TAC meetings. So there's other updates in your report, but those are our highlights.
Great.
Questions?
Appreciate the update and explaining about the distinction of still getting invites as placeholders for PAG. For example, Mountain Line is assigned a different person to the 66 PAG. And then we're not on the safety. I didn't chime in earlier. I think we figured you guys would cover it. So yeah, that's helpful.
I can just add in too real quick on the West Route 66 PAG. It is off of the regular tax schedule. It's a week, I believe, before, and to accommodate the holidays that for November and December. So those will be held on different days. Just as an FYI, but those invites will go out separately, at least for those first 2. We have them currently planned at Mountain Line, just for ease of organizing, at least, yes, at least until the end of the year, and then maybe we can figure out moving it somewhere a little bit more central at the beginning of the new year.
Okay, if nothing else, we're going to move into closing business. Any general announcements or anything from the board? Any board members? Okay. As noted, our next scheduled TAC meeting is January 24th, 2024. I know, I can't even believe we said that. And with that, it is 3:20 and we are going to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone online.
All right,
See you
thank
next year.
That was a good one.